All right, everybody, back with another Survivor video from Professional Picks. Hopefully we moved on to week 3. Lots and lots of games on the table this week that we will discuss. Of course, don't forget to like the page if you're using these picks, subscribe to the channel so you can see our other NFL analysis, and comment in the video who you're taking this week, or if you have any questions, as always, happy to help give you at least my perspective. Taking a look at the slate this week, you got a lot of teams that are favored by, over 3.5 points is usually the criteria we use to examine teams. A lot of teams favored by more than a field goal or even 2, and plenty favored by double digits. So definitely something to look into. As always, we also want to look at the schedule of each team to help make a more strategic pick. Looking at the schedule, I like to look out and see when I would consider potentially taking these teams later in the season. A lot of the times I tried staying away from picking teams against divisional opponents. That's not a hard and fast rule, but certainly divisional opponents on the road, for the most part, are things I stay away from. Otherwise, I'm looking at where are the best matchups for these guys down the road if I were to save them for a future week. So it's a lot to unpack on this slide. You're looking at, the team's schedule throughout week 18 for 10 different teams. Feel free to pause the video and really absorb this graphic and judge for yourself when you think you'd be taking these teams in other weeks. Starting as always, I want to talk about which team I would proceed with caution and think twice about picking. That is the Cleveland Browns at the Tennessee Titans. 4-point favorites as the opening line in week 3 for the Browns against the Titans. The Browns just got taken down by the Steelers on Monday Night Football. Granted, the Steelers defense did put up 2 touchdowns and is much better than the Titans, but I'd still be concerned about this game. The Titans played pretty well against the Chargers and ended up winning that game. I think a lot of people were surprised by that. And the Titans are a team that know how to play in close games and know how to win close games, especially behind Derrick Henry and their offensive line, and a pretty solid defensive line too. You saw Nick Chubb, the star running back for the Browns, go down with a nasty knee injury. There's no status on him yet, but you can almost guarantee he won't be playing in this matchup, which makes you a little more concerned. I would think the Browns would win this game, but given they're only 4-point favorites on the road and how many other great matchups there are this week, I'd probably stay away from them coming off a short week. Talking about the best pick here, it is the one team that is favored by more points than anyone else, the Kansas City Chiefs, coming off a win in Jacksonville. They got the Bears at home. The Bears have absolutely no defensive capabilities. The Chiefs should work through this defense like a hot knife and butter. Bears offense doesn't look too great, especially when they get down and get forced into passing situations. Justin Fields has proven, and his offense has proven, that's not very effective. And while you can blame the offensive woes and the offensive play calling on the team surrounding Justin Fields, you really can't argue with the amount of turnovers that he's had in his career. And that's something that the Chiefs defense is really good at doing, is forcing turnovers. So I would be shocked if the Chiefs were to lose this game. I think it's not often that you see a team that's favored by 13 points. It's not often you see a team with an 88.9% chance to win at home in a non-divisional game. So certainly a really good pick there for the Chiefs. Talking about best value, last week was the Giants. That paid off. I think the best value this week, before determining, you really do need to look at the schedule and determine where these teams might be picked down the road in a potential Survivor matchup. So I'm looking at a lot of teams here, and like I said, it's a lot to digest, but what I'm looking for is which teams am I not picking for a long time for the rest of the year, and picking them only a few times for the rest of the year. I think that criteria applies to a couple different teams. You got the Ravens here, you see. I think they got a pretty tough schedule. You're playing a lot of tough teams at home or a little bit weaker teams on the road. Doesn't help that they're in a tough division as well, but they have a pretty tough schedule there. I'm not going to go through every single team here, but what I am looking at is this Jacksonville schedule where it stinks for them because the poor teams they play are divisional opponents, and so I want to stick away from those as much as I can. But when you see they're out of divisional games, Atlanta's looking pretty solid this year. At Buffalo's a tough game. You're on the road versus New Orleans, who should win that game or win that division potentially. It's going to be tough with Atlanta. Pittsburgh, Tennessee, divisional game. San Francisco, non-divisional game with Cincinnati, Baltimore, at Tampa Bay, who's looking solid this year. So I'm really not loving the Jaguars' schedule throughout most of the season until they got a great non-conference game at home against the Panthers. But I'm not thinking really that I want to keep these guys in my pocket until week 17, and that's the only situation I'm going to play them in. So I think, given that fact that you're really only going to use these guys, the Jaguars, until week 17, it gives them great value in week 3. As you can see, they're favored by 8.5 points. It is a divisional game, which scares me, but the Texans just got decimated at home against the Colts. It makes me think that the Jaguars offense will do something very similar to this Texans defense, tear them up, as Trevor Lawrence has been shown that he's going to hit a variety of his wide receivers this season at will. Christian Kirk got 10 receptions for 110 yards last game against a tough Chiefs defense. Calvin Ridley went off in game 1, as well as Zay Jones. So plenty of weapons in this Jags offense to carve up the Texans defense. And that's why I think the Jags have the best value. That's why I think Chiefs are the biggest lock to win the game. Cowboys pretty close behind. But for best value, Jaguars here at 8.5. You're not going to see them as 8.5 point favorites a ton this season. Certainly not for a long while, as they got some tough games at home, some divisional games, and then some even tougher games on the road. Taking a look at not just good value or best value, but also some good value, I mentioned Dallas here. They've got an incredibly tough schedule, especially non-divisional schedule with New England, the Chargers, the Rams, the 49ers, Seahawks, Buffalo, Miami, even Detroit. So I'm only seeing, you could probably throw in at Carolina in the mix, except I like staying away from home teams. But those divisional games with the Giants and Washington, again, I like to avoid those games. So that's why I think you also get a lot of good value in Dallas here, as they got a tough schedule down the road, especially in their non-divisional games, and they're favored by a ton this week. Favored by 12 points at home, at the Cardinals on the road, but the Cardinals look, I wouldn't say terrible, but they certainly haven't been able to win games, been able to stick around, but always blowing in the end. Cardinals have not faced an opponent like the Cowboys yet this season, so I would love here picking the Cowboys as opposed to the Chiefs, so I think you can probably pick a few more times this season. Cowboys, I'm less confident in moving forward with their record. Either way, some great value there along with the Jaguars. Talking about some other picks, we'll start with the 49ers and go down the list. Great option here on Thursday Night Football. They're playing a Giants team that's likely going to be without Saquon Barkley. The Niners look like one of the most complete teams in football outside maybe the Cowboys, and I would be shocked if the Niners lost this game. You're going to be able to pick them a lot this season. I don't think you're going to go wrong with any team in the top 3 here that are favored by more than 10 points, but I don't think they have as much value as the Cowboys, and I don't think they're as sure of everything as the Chiefs, based on, the spread is a pretty good indicator of that as well. Talking next about the Ravens at home against the Colts. Colts have a big question at QB this week with Anthony Richardson going down with a concussion in week 1. Their rookie quarterback they drafted in the top 5 in this most recent year's draft. Ravens are one of the highest rated teams in Pro Football Focus overall. Even without J.K. Dobbins and a lot of the injuries they've had on both sides of the football, these guys still find a way to win, a testament to how good their head coach is with John Harbaugh. They got a great rookie in Zay Flowers too, who's been producing a lot of wide receiver for this Ravens team, something that this offense isn't used to, which has really been a run-heavy offense and relying on Mark Andrews for tight end. Really like the Ravens this week. Not as great as value as the Jaguars. Not as great as a pick as the 49ers, Cardinals, and Chiefs. So for me, it's a good pick, but I think in week 3, you should be taking the Chiefs, Cowboys, Niners, or the Jaguars here, depending on your preferences. Same kind of thing here. Bills at the Commanders. Good game. Probably going to win. But I think it's a tough opportunity to pick them. For a Commanders team that is impressed in the first couple of weeks, 2-0, despite facing some subpar opponents. But They also, Sam Howell is impressed a little bit, and you really just, in this situation, you have such good teams above, you don't really be taking the Bills on the road. You're going to get them in much better situations, like you could have last week when they were the best pick. I think the Dolphins and Broncos is a very intriguing game this week because on paper, I would think the Dolphins are favored by much more than 6.5 points here. Dolphins looking like one of the most complete teams in football, along with the 49ers and the Cowboys here. Broncos looking abysmal this year with the collapse against the Commanders. I would be shocked to see the Dolphins lose this game, but this line's a little fishy to me. Again, no pun intended with the Dolphins, but lines looking a little fishy. Would expect the Dolphins to be favored by much more, even especially being a home team, not a divisional game. I wouldn't pick them just because of the fact, again, there are such strong options above. For both the Bucks and I'll say for the Seahawks too in the next game, you don't need to be taking these teams with how strong the rest of the field is. Taking an away team here, it just doesn't make much sense. I think you very few times in Survivor you're going to get three teams that are favored by more than 10 points. I think you really got to take one of those three, unless you're taking the Jaguars for a great value play at 8.5. I don't see any reason to do anything outside of those top four teams. Same thing goes with the Seahawks. Road team, don't need it here, especially only favored by 4.5 points for a Panthers team coming off some competitive football and some good defensive play. If they don't turn the ball over as much, they have a chance to win games with how good their defense is. So I tried to make this quick, but as a quick recap, I think the Chiefs are the best pick, as they're a great team at home playing the Bears, who I think are in a lot of trouble this season. I think the best value you can get here is the Jaguars, given their schedule and really tough out-of-division play. But I think at the same time, the Cowboys are great value too, and more likely to win. I think if you're looking for any value, but to play it a little bit safer, Cowboys are a great pick. The riskier value play is the Jaguars, and then the other best couple of plays are the Chiefs and the 49ers. I think you got to stick with one of those four teams, and just because how strong the top four contenders are in this week, you really shouldn't be considering the other six teams mentioned. In any other week, a team that's favored by 7.5 points would be a very strong Survivor candidate. It just so happens that this week there's a lot of very lopsided matchups that make the other ones near the bottom obsolete. So I hope that helps with your decision making in week 3, and hope to see you guys all again in week 4 Survivor. Best of luck, and I'll see you next week.